Hello, welcome, bonjour, other words that are not the English welcome, and welcome to Robot Republic's newest show, Game Design Vivisection, because the games are still alive while we do it.
Oh, they are.
Oh, they are.
Oh, they are. That seemed really creepy. Please don't turn off after that bizarre
Please
intro.
don't.
Please do stick with us.
Now, for those who don't know, I'm Josh. I'm one of the reviewers for Robot Republic. With me is Riku. He's also called Josh, but frankly,
It gets
get
confusing, so one of us needs a second name.
Yeah, so we're going with Riku.
Yeah.
I've just realized my name on this is still Valton.
It's fine because we cut those off when we do the Zoom editing, so everyone's going to be sitting there watching this being like, the hell are they talking about?
Anyway, what this show essentially is we're going to be taking a look at a number of games, their design aspects. Each episode will look at something different. We're going to talk about where it was done well, where it's done badly. We might also compare some, including games that didn't do that fully, but had aspects of it.
Yeah, so this is going to be us basically talking bollocks.
Yeah.
About various game design mechanics and design things and what we thought worked well and what we thought didn't. And if you have thoughts, comments, etc., let us know down below in the comment section, because obviously, this is an open it's an open forum. Basically, we're recording this, but it's an open forum.
I mean, if you want to praise us for our views and see us as geniuses, fair enough. If you want to call us bloody idiots, fair enough.
But please do
remember,
I'm
going to assume you're my mother, but still. Anyway, the topic for today, for the first episode, we thought somewhat fitting due to the games that are coming out soon this year, is horror, but it's the difference between atmosphere versus jump scares.
Yeah.
Tension, atmosphere, stuff like that.
So good horror versus cheap horror is how, in my head, is how I kind of work it.
Yeah, but not as simple as that, because obviously both can be done well and both can be done absolutely awfully.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. And there are some really good examples of really bad atmosphere.
Oh, massively.
But at the same time, really good jump scares. And it doesn't. I question how you get atmosphere wrong and jump scares done well in a game.
Well, that's what we're here to discuss. So the first thing that we will probably do, obviously this is a new show for us as well, so a lot of this will be a bit learny as we go, so bear with us, guys. The first thing we should do is essentially do a brief description of what each of these aspects are. For those who don't know, most people watching this will know, but there's always some people who don't fully understand the wording or anything like that. So do you want to take atmosphere, Riku?
Oh, yeah. So the way that my take when we look at atmosphere in video games, especially when we're looking at horror games or horror elements in other types of games, because there are some really great games that aren't horror games, but they've got these brilliant, creepy atmospheres. Bloodborne, for instance, is an example of really creepy atmosphere in a non-horror game.
Yeah.
Atmosphere is how it's an amalgam of various design aspects. So it's the level design, it's the sound design, it's the lighting, it's the use of cinematics, and it's how it's built over time. Yeah. So it might be you're walking down a corridor and you hear something fall over in the corner, but there's nothing there, or a door kind of just like moves slightly. It doesn't slam shut because that'd be a jump scare, which we're going to talk about in a minute, Josh. But the atmosphere is very much, it's an amalgam and it's how it's layered. Really good atmosphere for me in video games is really good tense atmospheres are where you layer the level, the sound and audio, and the lighting and all these other various kind of visual and audio aesthetics together to create it. And there are some fantastic examples which we're going to talk about where atmosphere is key, and it's how it rises and falls as well. I always think that you need a rise and a fall, which, as you know,
sure,
like we both know, Josh, it's like drama and acting and performance and film and stuff. You need rises and falls within the tension, because if you keep your tension at 10 all the time, people will end up exhausted.
Yeah. No, you can't watch something that's a 10 out of 10. Just look at, for instance, The Woman in Black is a good example of...
Oh, it's phenomenal.
Right, we're not going to talk about theatre too much, don't worry.
We probably will at some point, but...
Oh, they'll be mentioned, because it's a plot thing. Sure, why not? As for jump scares, the easiest way to describe a jump scare is it's using the elements of surprise and misdirection. It's a bit like a magic trick. It's essentially taking the player down a road with them thinking something is going to happen or them not thinking something is going to happen and finding the best point to shove it directly in their face. That is the main point with them. They are often far more in your face than other forms of horror. Now, whether it's good or bad, that's up for debate. Some people really enjoy them, some people don't. And yeah, that's essentially what a jump scare represents. Now, jump scares are also not locked solely to horror. There are jump scares in numerous different things, to be honest, even if it's as simple as something hitting you from behind that you didn't see is technically a jump scare. And they can happen organically in games. They don't always get designed. We've all played a game where we get blue shelled and you never expected it.
It's infuriating.
Oh, it's irritating.
It's infuriating. And on the subject of blue shells, they made it worse because in the more recent Mario Kart games, you start getting a tracker that tells you when it's coming. So you've then got the tension on top of the jump scare in Mario Kart, and it's ridiculous.
And it's not always your little cousin next to you who you can then hold upside down and chuck them in a cupboard.
No,
which I never did. What?
What?
Come on.
Never.
Crazy.
No.
Little bastard. But yeah, so I think the best thing to look at first would probably to give a couple of examples of, I think, jump scares first.
Yeah, I think jump scares are easier to talk about how they work and don't work, rather than because atmosphere and tension, even my very waffly bollocks definition, if you will, it's a lot more nuanced. Whereas a jump scare, you know what a jump scare is. That is a jump scare. Whereas with atmosphere and tension, it's a bit more complex and nuanced. So yeah.
Yeah, and obviously this isn't. I know I keep saying obviously, but it's the best word I can think of. In terms of atmosphere, a lot of atmospheric horror games also retain jump scares.
Yeah, and actually, we were talking about this when we were planning this because we do actually plan these things on occasions. We were talking about actually jump scares are quite useful to break that tension at times.
Yeah, they work very well as a way to. Well, you said rise and falls. They can actually help create the fall
afterwards. Yeah,
because it can be quite hard to do when you're writing a plot. It's very difficult to figure out a time to drop and then rise again, because there's always a worry, especially if you're a designer, if you drop something, it will then not be able to climb up
build
again.
It back up. Yeah, and that is, to be fair, like especially when you're looking at horror, even like psychological thrillers and stuff like that as well, because there are video games that kind of drive into the more psych horror, the psych thriller as opposed to psych horror.
Yeah,
you know, it's that risk of, if we put the drop of the tension in here, how do we build it back up?
Yeah,
and that is the risk that you take, especially within horror from a design perspective and psych stuff, because that build, once you've had that initial scare, the second load of building, every subsequent building of tension, you then need to be really focused about how you're going to craft and how you're going to continue and sustain that.
Which is where games who focus solely on jump scares end up having an issue. For instance, the first game we'll mention is possibly the king of the jump scares, Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yes.
At a certain point, there is nothing Five Nights at Freddy's can do.
No.
It has done the jump scares. Now, this has been rectified in later games where they open it up a fair amount and you can walk around. But its reliance on jump scares means that at a certain point, it can't push you anymore. It just can't.
No, and I think that in itself, and obviously, if you're a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, fair play. I personally am not. I've tried to play each of them. I don't get on well with it. I mean, to be fair, if you're not new to the channel, you know that I'm crap with horror anyway, which is why it's amusingly ironic that we're talking about horror in the first episode of a show. But I've played each of those games, and you
might be better than Callie, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I feel like I am. I just sit here and scream and shout a lot and get through it, whereas Callie cries. Not literally, obviously. Although close to it a few times. But yeah, I think you become, as a player, if it's constant jump scare, you can start identifying when they're going to happen.
Yeah.
So you lose. So you've then, arguably you've then got the anticipation of the scare, but then it becomes almost rhythmic in a way.
Yeah.
You start finding a rhythm in what the jump scares, when the jump scares are going to occur, and you become numb to them. And I think the second you as a player become numb to the jump scare, a game that focuses solely on them becomes almost lethal. It just becomes background noise. You're almost then just pushing through to the end to get the tick in the box that says, well done, you've completed it.
Or screaming for camera, which is why
Yeah.
Five Nights at Freddy was so popular with
Well,
live
exactly.
streamers, which is no bad thing. It allows for a emotional
Right, it
response.
builds a community and and it creates entertainment.
It's very visceral.
Yeah.
But then if you're speaking about jump scares where it became obvious, one of the ones that did have an atmosphere and it could build an atmosphere, but Dead Space relied on jump scares quite a lot. But the original Dead Space had a huge issue in that the jump scares tended to occur when one of the alien necromorphs were in a vent and would jump out. And whenever you saw those vents, you would expect them to jump out, which eventually meant it lost.
Didn't. The knock-on effect of that, though, is that because I remember when it first came out, I played it and it terrified me. Like I was genuinely like vaguely traumatized by the start of Dead Space. But around
the chasing to the lift,
just all of it, like the start of the game, the first act of that game. Once you started Act 2, though, like you say, you started seeing the vents and you were like, oh, I know what's coming. So you would walk and approach the vent with enough distance to be able to shoot the alien that came, the necron that came out of it. So you almost then lost the knock-on effect of you then becoming numb to the jump scares was that you lost some of that tension that was being built.
It lessened the atmosphere somewhat when a mechanic became so clearly obvious.
Yeah.
You know, part of the atmosphere in Dead Space is the idea that these things have taken over the ship and they can come out from anywhere and they were the crew. But if they're all coming out the same vents, it's a bit like it's a bit like when you realize you're walking through one of those haunted walks. You know, like they close off a place and they put everything and people run out screaming at you. The minute you figure out they can't touch you, it's sort of just stand and stare at them till they get uncomfortable. And I've stood and stared at a lot of people until they've gotten uncomfortable. But only a few of them couldn't do anything about it. I'm not a weirdo.
He is. It's fine.
Why they hired me as a reviewer.
But I think as well, you've got especially with horror games and stuff, even the ones that are solely even the ones that don't use many jump scares, there's a need for them. Like we said, it's about this kind of rise and fall and kind of the tension being broken and stuff and resetting that tension. But I think a well choreographed jump scare, and it is an absolute classic one, but the original Resident Evil 2 door loading screen in the second one where you walked out the clock tower and there were 2 zombies that walked in. Because all of a sudden you went from a safe space. It was like, oh, okay, the door loading screens are my safe space. Nothing bad will happen to me whilst I'm walking through the door. And then in Resident Evil 2, you got like 2/3 of the way through the game, and they were like, "Wham! Here's a couple of zombies who were coming through the door," and it was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa!" And it was a jump scare that you didn't see coming.
Sure, no, that's an example of a jump scare being done well because it's subverting the expectations. I mean, for instance, Dead Space could easily rectify it by having you come up to a vent expecting someone to come up and they come up from underneath you or above you. And it can happen. It does happen. Dead Space is good at having things come up behind you. Essentially, it uses a forced perspective, which we'll talk about at another time. Resident Evil also does that. It's famous for having a forced perspective, which arguably that got lessened in the remakes because it gave you actual camera controls, especially in Resident Evil 2 and 3.
Yeah, I was going to say the 2 and 3 make with the 4. Well, obviously, we'll do a whole episode on forced perspective, but it does. It definitely it altered how they approached the horror aspects of it, especially with regard to the jump scares and the tension, because you could control. You could see around corners if you were quite cheeky. You could be like, "Oh, see through that corner. It's fine." A game that, however, that I think we both agree is the pinnacle of jump scares that are well choreographed and well designed is also the game that is probably the best for atmosphere and tension in Alien Isolation.
Sure. No, Alien Isolation is one of the best ones for jump scares in that it's hard to explain. One of the things I love in Alien Isolation is the mechanic it has where if you do a lot of shooting, the alien will hear you.
Yeah.
And if you're very careful, you can see the drool coming out of the particular vent.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you're tense, you're running, suddenly you are grabbed from the alien and killed.
I found when I was playing it, it's the sections where you're having to deal with the synths and you're having to sneak onto the bridge where the synths are, but you've also got the xenomorph chasing you. And I dodged the vent where the xenomorph was, but wasn't paying attention to what was just down the corridor and got grabbed by a synth. And because I hadn't registered that, because again, and it became that focusing on the xenomorph actually then blocked out the rest of the threat, which then meant that the jump scares came from from a very clear source, and you could see it down the end of the corridor because you're so focused. And it does this really amazing thing of, because obviously we all, people that have played that game, most people are aware of the Alien franchise, and we all know that the Alien, the xenomorphs are these genuinely perfect hunting, killing machines, and the way it's introduced in the game is so beautifully done. But the way the game draws your attention to the alien being your sole focus of fear when you've got a lot of other problems to deal with is one of the reasons why it elevates those jump scares, because you are focused on the alien when it rears its ugly head, that you are almost blinded to those other things that will get you. Or at least that was in my perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good example of what I define as an organic jump scare. It's something the game creates a situation where it can occur. Very hard to do design-wise because you've got to juggle AI, everything else, and create the right level of fear. One I would say I think does it well, even though the games themselves have problem, are the Fatal Frame series.
Yeah.
The ones where you take pictures and the ghost appears, because that's essentially, it is a jump scare.
Yeah.
But it is a self-inflicted jump scare. The player knows it's going to happen. But they have to do it.
What I like about the Fatal Frame games is they almost flip the anticipation.
Yeah.
So that when you take the photograph, the ghost is going to appear, but you have complete control over when that happens. But what you don't know is what the ghost is going to look like and how it's going to react and everything else. And that is what is brilliant about how they are crafted as jump scares. Because the player is in complete control about when they get hit by the jump scare. So, they can, tense the butt cheeks and everything else that you do when you're scared. But the reactions and what happens when you hit that camera button is then out of your control. And I think it's one of the cleverer things that I enjoy about these games. Obviously, there are issues with the games themselves generally, but yeah.
I mean, sure, no game is perfect. Everything has flaws. Special mention I want to mention for jump scares actually is Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion.
Yeah, I haven't played this.
It's a weird game. You essentially have to go down 100 floors. You run along, and as you do, jump scares jump out at you, but they're badly done cardboard cutouts that just jump out at you. They're not scary. And because they're not, you start thinking, well, this is fine. And then the scary stuff turns up, which is things following you.
Oh.
And then you realize the jump scares are actually a hindrance. They stop you moving when you're being chased. So they scare you for a very different reason. Because suddenly you've got to dodge around them and move. Or you have arachnophobia and a cute little spider comes up and it scares the crap out of you. Entirely plausible.
Would be me, to be fair.
Well, you're not the first, you're not the last.
No, I know. I'm expecting at some point that for that to be a, play this, Riku. I'll be like,
they're very cute spiders. They're not.
No.
I mean, it's not like someone's petting a frostbite spider in Skyrim. Something I've tried to do, but they're very unfriendly.
See, now there, right, is an example of a game that is not a horror game, but makes use of the jump scares very well in the fact that there are, and it's probably, again, it might just be me, but I have walked into myriad caves in Skyrim thinking, oh, there are spider webs. I go in armed with my firestorm spell, ready to nuke them all. Don't see the little fucker hiding in the corner though, do I? And then it jumps at me and I cry.
Well, it's like Grounded with their spiders.
No, that's nightmare fuel. Even in arachnophobia mode, I can't turn it all the way down because I want to see where their legs are. Otherwise, they're just a floating ball, which is terrifying.
Oh, so which is more terrifying, the floating ball or the giant spider?
Four-legged is fine.
Four-legged floating ball.
Four-legged is fine. It's basically just a really angry, weirdly shaped cat with 4 legs.
Odd you go with cat, but fair enough. I mean, cats do eat spiders. Fair. No judgments. No judgments.
They're also evil at times. Cats can be evil.
I constantly realize my cute, adorable little cat is not cute and adorable to a myriad of creatures that are smaller than it, and she jump scares the crap out of them.
Yeah.
I also want to mention Fear, which I'll also mention in Atmosphere, because Fear does jump scares a lot, and some work and some don't. But the one great one in Fear is when you first climb down a ladder and little girl Alma is in front of you. because ladders are meant to be safe.
Yes, they are. It goes back to that Resident Evil thing with the door opening, though. And this
Yeah.
is what really good jump scares subvert the expectation. They flip the safety off.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not so much the case now because
No.
obviously things pass and games change. Now, getting scared on a ladder is much more common. In our day, when we were less old,
Yes.
it was far less common. Or you had to be sort of staring at, naked Snake's ass as he climbed up a ladder for 5 minutes, listening
Yeah.
to a warbly song and kind of
Yeah,
thinking,
that took forever, didn't it?
yeah, this isn't impressive. I'm just bored and I want to go
Yeah.
to bed. So can we?
I'm about to get yelled at because I'm still playing video games at 11 o'clock at night. But the reason I'm still
Yeah.
playing video games is because the save point's at the top of this incredibly long, frankly, obscenely long ladder.
No, yeah, it's a painfully long ladder. Why am I
Yeah.
still here? Let me get to the end.
Yeah.
But from jump scares, we must transition to a much more complicated world. World of dark corridors, scary noises, showers, people
Bizarre
named
lighting.
Clyde.
And very bizarre
That
lighting.
too.
Yeah, bizarre lighting.
The world of atmosphere,
Yes.
which is a difficult one to quantify, but we do
Yeah.
have some selections that may be able to.
We do. I think for me, one of the in more recent years, I think one of the most impressive forms of atmosphere in a horror game I've seen, to the point where I actually had to stop playing the game and wait for my partner to come home because I refused to go any further without a suitable adult in the room, was the dollhouse in Resident Evil Village.
It's a great example. It's
And
absolutely
everything.
horrifying.
It is horrifying.
I hated it.
It is so grim.
I
The
hate
worst
dolls.
bit is, I found the second you're running away from Feety the giant fetus.
Is that his name, or is
No,
this a
that's
name
what I
you?
call him.
Feety, you
Feety
can't
the
call
giant
a
fetus.
giant fetus a cute name.
But I call him Feety as in Foety.
That doesn't make it better. Sounds
It
like you're
makes it
giving him
worse.
feety pajamas.
It makes it worse, to be fair. But anyway, the second Feety turned up, I was like, okay, this is horrible, but I can deal with this because I'm gonna escape.
Not a doll.
But
yeah,
everything up to that point was so horrible, but it was so well crafted.
it was
everything from Angie appearing to disappearing to you having no weapons to the garbled radio nonsense of Mia being like, I am so sorry, and then just all of the creepy things that were occurring around you. And again, that employed some jump scares.
The doll you had to open and take bits at her.
Dismembering your dead wife's mannequin as well. That was weird.
That's it. Who carved that? Why?
I don't know.
Get a
Mother
hobby.
Miranda had far too much time on her hand.
She
clearly.
really did. I mean, then she got killed by mold, which, clean your drains.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say anti-mold spray.
That leads to a great example of what makes a strong atmosphere. So it's not just the lighting, it's not just the sound, it's not just the events happening or the physics engine. Physics plays a large part in any good atmosphere. You want a good atmosphere, you want things to fall, noise, stuff like that. Because otherwise, if you run into the room and it's got the right tension's also very important. But you hit a table and nothing happens, it suddenly becomes comedic.
Yeah, it becomes a detachment from the world. You enter this really tense environment, you hit something and nothing happens. Like, oh, it's a video game, it's fine.
Yeah. It's something a lot of stealth games do. Stealth games, we'll talk about stealth games at some point, but it's the concept of, to be fair, you can't involve yourself with everything in an environment. It would take too long. It would take way too much artistic direction as well as editing to get any of it to work. But you've got to be relatively fair. So it's the difference between noise making. One I think does it really well that isn't specifically a horror game is, and I don't know if you've played any of the Dying Light games.
I played the first one.
First one does some
similar
thing.
Ago.
Dying Light 2, you've got to go into these kind of infected zones. They're all locked off. Dead Rising did a similar thing.
Yes.
Where it's kind of locked off. It's dark. You've got to sneak through. If you go in during the day, you'll die. If you go in at night, you might survive because there's less infected. But it makes use of a set objective, so you know where you're going and you know what you've got to get. But it's winding. There are zombies everywhere. In the beginning, it is intense. And it also shows where one of the issues with atmosphere can arise. As if you are able to fight, and as you get more powerful, these things lose a lot of effect.
Yeah.
Like if I can go in and kill everything, I have no atmospheric intent to care.
Yeah. I mean, I always, I've had discussions with our lovely editor and producer, Callie, about, the role of guns in video games, and I welcome them. The second I get a gun in a horror game, I'm like, right, I'm shooting things. I can defend myself. We're all good. If I don't have that, like something like Visage, for example, where you don't have a weapon,
Yeah.
chills me to my core.
Or famously Outlast.
Or
There is
Outlast
no
as
gun.
well. You don't get a weapon in Outlast, and that game is traumatizingly horrible to play.
It is evil beyond belief, but that is used by a very good. If Outlast didn't have the environment it had, same with Outlast 2, it picked a very good environment, it would suddenly lessen.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. And this is what I mean, when we started the kind of show and stuff, we were talking about with atmosphere, it's layering all these things together in a really specific manner. And I almost feel, especially when you're looking at how you kind of construct these things as a level of, it's almost choreography. It's like a dance, really well designed, precise, atmospheric horror is choreographed through artificial intelligence of the world that you're in and through physics. You take all these things and then there is this, it's like a ballet in motion of horror.
Yeah.
To get these things to work.
I mean, one thing that's often not looked at as important as it could do in regards to that dance is the effect diegetic sound has.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, diegetic sound is sound that exists in the world. So, for instance, your footsteps would be diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound is soundtracks, stuff that doesn't exist in the world. So, one game that's always done it particularly well, two games. I'll do two games. Silent Hill and the Metro series both do it very well. So the Metro series, if you've ever played any of them, you go through these dark tunnels. There is not a lot of music. It is mostly the sound of the tunnel, the walking, maybe distant sounds, and all of that helps to build the world you're in. Silent Hill, same thing. It makes use of very loud footsteps, and the sounds of the creatures you can hear are alien. They're weird.
Yeah, the use of sound in Silent Hill, and this is why I am dreading and also loving the fact that we're getting a Silent Hill 2 remake.
Yeah.
Is I remember playing Silent Hill 2 when I was probably way too young and probably shouldn't have played the game. Like Resident Evil 3.
I mean, I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show when I was like 8, and I turned out normal.
I think most people did.
Yeah, I turned out perfectly fine.
Exactly. But the sound design in that is what creeped me the hell out the most. I still remember the sounds of, and it wasn't Pyramid Head.
No, I found the nurses.
The nurses in the hospital were the most horrifying bit about that game was the nurses, the noises they made, and the fact that they were just so random.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, another good example is the Condemned series. Has some great moments. The first one when you're being hunted by a psychopath in a house, and that's just hideous.
No, that was horrible. I remember playing that, and I had to actually walk away.
Yeah, it's
on the car. I was like, no,
I'm good. I don't want to do this anymore. I'll play the second one where I can Kamehameha people with laser knights or whatever the fuck.
I have no idea what happened into onward. Really, it got weird.
It all got very weird.
It went from really terrifying. I mean, I didn't get very far in it, to be fair, so it might have got really, really weird beforehand. But yeah.
Or if you want to go slightly more recent, a great example is Last of Us with the clickers.
Yes, I was actually going to bring up The Last of Us as an example of really good atmosphere because they're terrifying. That for the first game, when you're going through the subway station, I think it's or the underground mall or something. It's quite early on in the game, and you've got the clickers.
Yeah,
and just hearing them and having to be so careful about how you're moving around the game. the game world.
It's horrifying. But as with any game, if you find a way to beat it, it's quite weird. I mean, for instance, clickers, throw a beer bottle and then throw a Molotov, and you will kill all of them. And it lessens the horror somewhat. But that is the danger of an interactive media. If you can't stop people being people.
No, exactly. But then this is part of how we enjoy games as different people. You know, when I played that, I never did that because I was genuinely like, I'm just going to sneak around them because screw not killing one of them and having it rush me. So I was like, no, I'm going to sneak around them all. And that made it really, really tense for me. And then when I went back and played it again, I was like, you know what? I know what happens now if I sneak around them. I'm going to see what happens if I Molotov them. Turns out I can't aim Molotovs for love nor money. And I got mauled by 2 clickers and it was horrible.
See, I can never leave anyone alive. I have to murder everybody, for I am the fear. I am the ending. But the use of sound always great. Another important aspect is the world.
Yeah.
Have you frozen? You didn't freeze, you moved.
I moved.
Is obviously the world they're in. For instance, if I had to use one, I would say Subnautica, as someone who is scared of the ocean. Not just the ocean, but the concept of a truly alien world is something that will always be made intimidating.
Yeah.
So Subnautica, big blue, they can come from any direction. That way, that way, that way, that way, that way, any direction. That's part of the fear in the real ocean as well as in the fake ocean. But then you add the darkness of the deeper bits, the sounds.
Yeah.
It all comes together. And Subnautica is not a naturally scary game.
No, it's a survival game, but again, it uses things. I think what you've touched on there is one of the things that leads to really good horror atmospheres is this fear of the unknown. You know, I mentioned right at the start. Bloodborne as an example of a game that is not. It's not a horror game. It's a Soulsborne. It is an angry hack and slash game which is brutally hard. But there are so many aspects of that game that become horror-like through the sound design and the world design and just the fact that it's like Victorian London, but Victorian London on werewolf steroids. And it's just slightly to the left of normal that makes it a bit more jarring. You know, instead of walking down.
Now, I know for a fact.
Go.
I know for a fact there are some people in our audience who very much enjoy Victorian Werewolf in London and would view that as a fun night out.
I mean, I would, to be perfectly honest, but at the same time, it is quite jarring, especially as you move through the game and you move from like, you know, townsfolk that haven't had a shave in a few weeks, months, to full-on bizarre tentacle monsters and human-faced spiders. And the whole game, it evolves, and the atmosphere becomes a lot more oppressive and intense because it starts off familiar but a little bit weird, and as you work through the game, you just drift into this more obscurist, bizarre, absurdist kind of world, and I find that really unnerving.
Well, I mean, that is the definition of the kind of what was his name? How have I forgotten his name?
Lovecraft.
The Cthulhu-esque,
Lovecraft.
Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah,
it sans the massive amount of racism that Lovecraft often pervade.
Yes.
However, nothing is perfect, and there are always games that actually end up starting or not managing to create this good atmosphere. For instance, I recently tried to play Evil Within. Starts off great.
Yeah.
Starts off great, right up until you get to the point where the E3 trailer ended, and then
the first chunk in the hospital,
shooting people.
The first bit in the hospital is quite good.
Yeah,
and then you escape the hospital and they give you a gun, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe we'll go for a Resident Evil kind of vibe. And then you get to the bit where you get over the bridge and it's like, you know, kind of daylight hours, and it's like, here's a sniper rifle and whatnot, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, the minute you get a gun more powerful than like a 1950s shotgun is the point where you're sort of.
But again, I think that's why, and I adore the Resident Evil series.
Yeah.
But it's why Resident Evil games, they start off tense and horrifying. And the second you get a shotgun and a decent amount of ammo for it, the game then becomes just a running and gunning zombie action game.
Well, I mean, we talked, and we'll bring it up now because pacing is obviously important. We talked about the remake of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, where you have the comparison between the Nemesis and
Mr. X.
Mr. X. And my point is, at first, Mr. X can be seen as intimidating, but at a certain point, he just becomes a pace killer.
Yeah.
You end up having to wait until he leaves, or you can get past him. And if you're just scooping around, grabbing everything, it lacks intimidation. It
and
just
that's
becomes boring.
But, you know, we talked about this. You know, I really like Mr. X in the earlier parts of that game, but the second you go back to the police station for the second time around, after you've done the sewers or the orphanage, you know, whatever midsection you've got to do for whichever character, it just becomes a faff. And you end up, you know, I remember specifically, like, you know, trying to go around and collect a load of stuff, and I was like, I walked and stood in a safe room and went and made myself a cup of tea to wait for Mr. X to bugger off. Whereas,
helicopter.
Well, yes, indeed. Whereas Nemesis, and I loved the original 3. I enjoyed the remake of 3. It wasn't perfect, and they lost a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff was kind of lost, and chopped out and stuff. But that was possibly because they were like trying to get it out the door as quickly as possible. But I still found it enjoyable. But I think Nemesis there is a lot more choreographed. I did find, and I know we both disagree on this, I found the bit where he chases you out of the building with a rocket launcher, and instead of running away from Nemesis, you're dodging missiles, ridiculous. That just, for me, that destroyed any horror at all.
I found it ridiculous, but a point I would make is I feel like the Resident Evil series as a whole is a bit of a coin flip on how horror they can be. Like Resident Evil 4 is very little horror. Resident Evil 5 tries to be horror, but it's mostly racist.
I mean, Resident Evil 5 is horrendously racist, Uncharted with zombies.
That, and also anytime you add an AI or a companion AI, horror is, which
it just falls apart. And then we get to 6, which is frankly just perfection from a terrible B-movie horror perspective.
Sure, but it depends which story you play as 6.
Yeah, it depends whether you want to play Call of Duty Zombies,
or
Resident Evil 4, the watered-down version, or whatever the hell.
Teenage romance.
Yeah, the teen romance to Twilight.
You know, the game Resident Evil developers went, you know that character you met as a child? Here's her in a towel.
Yeah, here's her. But they also kind of went, what's really hot right now? Oh, Twilight.
Yeah, she can be with Albert Wesker's son.
Twilight's big. We'll give Albert Wesker a son, and we'll make a kind of like will they, won't they, romancy thing that shouldn't happen.
The question I have is, did Albert Wesker wear his sunglasses during?
Oh, absolutely.
But like, you would feel like he would.
He did. You know full well he did.
Well, do you think he's going, yes, bend that over?
Afterwards, he went.
Then he punched a boulder. And then I can do it too, Chris. Chris.
Hot.
I can do it too, Chris.
That is literally one of the... I have to admit, and again, it's a game that does really well with tension in the first half and then just drops the ball in the second half, was Resident Evil Village. And again, I loved it. I loved Village.
I mean, Village...
just completely... Like, running away from Lady Dimitrescu, let's be serious now, none of us really ran away from her. Initially, we all wanted to be trod on by her at least once.
Yeah, there was a lot of, oh no, I hope she doesn't.
Oh no, she caught me. Oh, what a shame. I've stood in a corner and she's caught me. Oh no.
Oh no, my foot's stuck and my butt sticking out.
But she was like almost the opposite. I always look at her AI in Village in the castle as what Mr. X's should have been.
Yeah, she was avoidable.
But you could get around her, and then you had these open areas where you could get around her, and you had areas where you would have to kind of like shoot her and gun her down. Not that you ever would, because who could? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, but she followed her rules were a lot more open-ended than Mr. X's was. Mr. X would stick in a hallway if he knew where you were and just follow that hallway. And if you pick the wrong room, you're stuck there because he'll chase you. You can shoot his hat off.
She had a lot more free roam within the castle and stuff, which was quite nice. And it had that naturalistic kind of ability of the AI was really, really interesting. And again, you then have we've already talked about the doll's house, which is just
horrifying.
It was horrifying. It was perfect. And they even did it really well in the Shadows of Rose DLC. Like, completely different take on it.
But still horrifying.
I actually found it worse.
Sure. I haven't played Shadow of Rose.
It's worse. It's definitely worse. And when you play it, you will work out why, and we will probably talk about it on the show. But
Mm, mm,
it's worse from a different perspective.
okay.
It's
I
worse
mean,
from a different perspective, and I think that's the biggest thing for me. It was a different thing that I wasn't expecting, and I didn't like it. And I've always wanted to see it in a video game, and now I've experienced it, and I didn't like it.
cool.
It,
I'm
it
not going to do
terrified
that.
me.
I'm going to
It
avoid
terrified
that.
me.
Fuck that. No. No.
But
It's not going to happen.
wow, yeah, it is good. It is good DLC to be fair. Not perfect, but enjoyable enough.
I mean, it's a weird one with how games advance, Resident Evil especially, but Silent Hill too. I mean, Silent Hill 1 and 2 were amazing, and then Silent Hill started going very
Very
weird. It
downhill.
didn't
Yeah,
leave certain aspects alone. It kept doing the same thing.
yeah.
The
There was
nurses
no
and Pyramid
evolution.
Head.
I think this is where Resident Evil has almost trumped Silent Hill. And if you're a Silent Hill fan, please don't yell at me in the comments.
Yeah,
But it Resident Evil has evolved, or has it tried to do something different each time? They've had the kind of, you've had your stalker enemies, you've had your weird umbrella stuff as a narrative thread, but in terms of the actual games themselves, they've tried to do something different, be it move away from being in, Podunk town in America to, bases in the Antarctic and, what is effectively Alcatraz Island,
yeah.
to bizarre little quaint Spanish villages full of sociopathic infected murderers, to a really, really poor representation of Africa, to a globe-trotting adventure that started off with a viral bomb exploding in China.
Weirdly
Resident
fitting,
Evil
slightly
has,
suspicious.
But Resident Evil, I always feel is kind of like it's always tried to do something different with each of its installments since kind of
Yeah,
like since after three, they've tried to do something different because they were like, oh,
I mean,
we've nuked Raccoon City, we can't really milk that anymore, can we?
they still try and add Umbrella into certain things, but
Yeah,
frankly, Umbrella as a concept was always difficult. But that's where you move on to another point that's actually the hardest to quantify in any form of immersion is how you put it with the plot.
yes,
Because you need the plot isn't always the most important aspect, but you need a solid reason of why you're there.
yeah,
So Outlast does it quite well. They explain you're there to get a story.
yeah,
So there's a reason you can't fight back. Alien Isolation, you're an engineer. It lets you build things. There's a reason everything happens.
yeah,
You're not a trained Marine, which is why you're not blowing up the alien with a, super pulse rifle.
yeah.
It's all easy explained what the situations are,
But
how you're getting there.
even the Resident Evil series, the earlier ones do that quite well. You're either a special tactical,
Yeah,
you
your
know,
special
you're
forces or
you're that kind of like, you're a specialized unit of the police, or you're a police rookie, or apparently a superhero who wears hot pants, Claire Redfield.
I mean,
You know,
well,
you've
it's no
kind of
Jill Valentine.
you've
We all
got.
love Jill
I
Valentine.
always think, I, we both know that I'm a big lover of narrative within games, and I could spend hours talking about just narrative structures and stuff, and we probably will at some point.
Yeah, we
I
might
always
break it
find,
up into more than one
oh
episode.
yeah, no, we're going to have several episodes of narrative related things, but I think it's that the answering of the why you're in the situation you're in. I mean, like, a more recent example, Poppy Playtime, is very ambiguous with its narrative, and it's like, well, why the hell have you gone to this horrible factory full of murder toys?
Yeah, why haven't you just left?
And because it's releasing episodically, there's almost that I'm kind of bored. I don't really care why I'm here now, and I'm
Yeah,
kind of
meanwhile,
losing
Bendy and
interest.
the Ink Machine did release episodically, but it gave you a solid reason.
Yeah, you knew why you were going there from day dot, and you
Yeah,
worked
and
through.
that
I mean,
helps.
I might have missed something in Poppy Playtime when I played it. To be fair, the only bits that I can remember at this point in time was me shouting, screaming, and swearing
I mean,
down the
you've got an ass
microphone.
slap thing, and that's about it. Where you just
Oh, I was the bit where I ran away from Huggy Wuggy was just horrible.
where anything called
Um,
Huggy Wuggy is already on my
it's just
radar as something to be concerned about.
yes, exactly. Um, but yeah, I think having that strong narrative pillar,
It helps.
it does help. It helps from a player perspective. It helps to know why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, it also helps to fit. Because obviously, there's always a sense of realism in the world you're in. That's how any plot works. Look
Mm.
at Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy spends a long time explaining the rules of the world because that way it helps you understand.
Yeah.
You then go, well, that guy's done that. If I didn't know this, if
Then
I
that
didn't
would
know how
make no
magic
sense.
worked,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be impressive. But the fact that he has done it and I know and I've gone through it with the early level stuff and I've seen how this all builds up,
Yeah.
I know that's impressive.
I think we can all remember, those of us that played Final Fantasy games, we all remember what it felt like the first time we used the limit break, or the first time that we used Flare or Holy or Ultima as a spell,
Yeah.
and we were like, mind just blew.
Or when you
Completely.
do the Final Fantasy VII and you spend the entire early game using these small spells and your attacks do like
Yeah.
100 damage. And then you have the flashback and you
Yeah.
get to see Sephiroth do something and he does 9999
Yeah.
damage.
And
That
you just sit there and go, oh my God.
Yeah, that builds up. And horror games are no different. If you set, let's say, for instance, you have, well, I'll use Evil Within because Evil Within chooses a shaky premise.
Yeah.
It goes with the world is being changed by a madman's brain.
Which then became really convoluted, and actually it became more convoluted than Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
And I love Kingdom Hearts, but I will admit that storyline is batshit.
Oh, yeah, no, that storyline's darkness,
But
darkness.
The Evil
sad.
Within did like what Kingdom Hearts did over like 4 games in one, and I was like, I don't understand this at all.
It removes you from the world, so any horror that occurs is
Not real.
Seems unfair.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you take let's take one of your favorites, Resident Evil 7.
Oh, that was beautiful.
You know, because of what you've seen, how powerful the Bakers, is it the Bakers?
The Bakers.
How powerful they are. So the fact that when they chase you and catch you, you understand what's going on. It doesn't feel as cheap.
And I think that is the role of narrative within horror, is if it can help contextualize and explain the why you're there and the how strong the things you're facing are, then it will add to your overall thing, be it the use of tension and atmosphere, or be it the use of jump scares. If you know why you're there and what your goal is, it's why I always, again, if you're a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, fair enough, not for me. Have played them, not for me. I find the narrative, the base level, because I know that there's like literally like probably gigabytes worth of wiki pages on the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's at this point, but the kind of initial narrative of you are a nighttime security guard in a pizzeria with animatronic scary robot things
Who
just
kill
felt a
people.
who kill people, just felt a bit too like, well, what?
Yeah, it's a weird thing to
premise
do.
wise, I was like, what? And then I think the most recent one, Security Breach, you're playing a kid who who runs away from his parents and stays in there after hours, and then has to escape the murder bots. And it's like,
why?
Why? My biggest question is, why are the robots murderous? And like I say, there is a lot of ambiguous kind of like, fan theories and lore and whatnot on the internet, but I would prefer to know why the robots are killing people from the outright.
Now, we should specify, this doesn't mean you have to go in knowing everything. Knowing the plot is not the same as knowing the world.
Yes.
For instance, you go into Fear, you understand that Alma is not real.
Yeah.
You know
she is still terrifying.
Exactly. And then you learn her story as she goes. That doesn't remove your initial thing of she is a terrifying, not real thing, but it gives you context. Alien Isolation. There's a famous thing with
the xenomorph is.
Yeah. But even if you didn't, what Alien and a lot of horror movies do, and I'm going to go into movies slightly here, is there's a concept where a good horror movie, you don't see the monster until the character sees the monster.
Yeah.
So even if you know what a xenomorph is, you don't see the xenomorph in Alien Isolation until Ripley sees it.
But that's what Ridley Scott did with the first Alien movie.
Yeah.
You saw the chest, you saw the face hugger, you saw the chest burster, you didn't see the full grown xenomorph.
Nope.
Until Ellen Ripley came face to face with it in those corridors. And even now, I mean, that film was made in the late, I think it was 78, 79, the film was made.
Something like that.
Even now, there are moments in that film, and I've seen it a lot because I genuinely love that film.
That's a great movie.
It's timeless. but there are still moments now where even though I know that the xenomorph is going to pop out, it still makes me jump a little bit.
Yeah, that bit in the vent where the
Yeah,
xenomorph just
where
the
it's
whole
just bam, and you're like that.
gas
You go, oh
hands.
Christ! Even though you know it's coming, like, oh God. But again, that's what they do so brilliantly in Alien Isolation is they took what was fantastic about the xenomorph in that first film. They basically what they did was, and I said this when I first played it, they recreated the first movie in
Yeah,
the
they
most
did.
flawless fashion possible.
The only weakness they had is the middle bit just dragged on.
Yeah, I mean to be fair, it could have been
Could
the
have been
game is
2 hours
from a
shorter.
from a from a you know gameplay perspective, it could be about 2 hours shorter. There are some things in there that you could have just chuck it out. When you're dealing with the xenomorph, when you're dealing with the horror and the stuff in there, it is done so beautifully. And again, I find with the more recent versions and like supermassive games, their horror games, their more recent ones have done this quite well.
Mm.
The Dark Pictures anthology, there's been a bit up and down.
Not one I'm familiar with, I'll be fair.
The Man and Medan, Little Hope, so the kind of ones
I
that are
know
all
Man
in
and
the
Medan.
yeah. They're all right, and I like those. They build relatively good atmosphere. They build relatively. There are some decent-ish jump scares in there, normally involving random animals that make you jump for no reason, which I feel are cheap, but fair play, you got me. But and I know that you looked at this as well, but Until Dawn.
Yes, Until Dawn is an interesting example.
It has this really good mixture of tension and jump scares, but every single thing that happens in that game, or the majority of things, obviously they're all choreographed and scripted.
Yeah.
But because you have so much choice and you are given, and again, this is why I enjoy the Dark Picture games, because you as a player are given so much choice over the narrative, there will be things where you will sit there scratching your head and being like, well, why the hell did that happen? But then as you play through the game, you learn more. And I think going back to the whole point about, you need to understand the world, not the plot from the get-go, helps. You play Until Dawn, you have that whole opening section, which kind of basically sets the foundations for what you're dealing with.
Yeah, you know that something is doing something and it's dangerous. You don't need to know what it is, but you need to know that the thing, that's how they do the whole use with dead deer and the guy hunting you in the beginning. It's all very clear that something is going on.
Yeah.
It's not the plot, but it is the world.
Yeah.
And Until Dawn also makes use of a fear that's created by choice.
Yes, exactly.
There is a tension in choosing what's going to happen.
But you also have tension. You also get tension as a result of actual gameplay mechanics as well. The QTEs. The one that I hate the most in all of the supermassive games, and I love supermassive games, are the fucking heartbeat monitors. Because I sit there, I'm in a rhythm. I'm pushing X. I'm in a rhythm. It's going well, and they're like X, 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 triangle, and I'm like shit. And then I'm like, and then my character ends up getting caught and dying, and it just snowballs basically. And I sit there and go, because I didn't hit triangle, I killed 4 people.
Well, why only 4? Kill 5, kill 9,
yes.
Kill 150,
kill all of the people in the game.
That's what I did in Until Dawn the first time because they were all quite annoying. But that's me. I'm just a fun kitty cat.
I always go into those games thinking I'm going to try and keep as many people alive as possible.
Yeah, but then you hear them talk.
I recently played House of Ashes, which I really enjoyed. It was less tense. It was more kind of like B-movie vampires with American commandos in Iraq. I really enjoyed it. I quite liked it. The ending was completely and utterly batshit crazy, and I didn't see it coming. And I was like, well done. I appreciate this. This is completely bonkers. But there were moments there where I was like, everyone had been stayed alive. And then it turned out, after completing the game and losing half of, I think I ended up with 2 people alive at the end out of a team of 7. Found out that there were like 2 choices I should have made in Act 1 differently that resulted in 4 people dying in Act 3.
That's unfortunately just a whole bit of bullshit.
Yeah, and that's my biggest problem. I'm like, you should have more checkpoints with that. But that's a completely different question because we'll talk about divergent and branching narratives completely in another episode.
Yeah,
but that kind of, I always find as well with those games, if you've got control over people's lives, like, because obviously, Resident Evil stuff, it's your one character, but the more cinematic ones, like supermassive games, kind of like their games and their kind of thing.
Yeah, or the Quarry or Until Dawn.
Yeah, this is what I mean. All of Supermassive's games, you are literally in control of the lives of people that you get to know over the course of the story. And yes,
Even
you're
if
going to
they
have people,
suck.
even if they suck. And let's be serious now, a lot of the characters in Until Dawn sucked.
All of them, pretty much.
All of them. I liked Rami Malek's character because he was just a dick. And he was
mean,
unapologetically a
an
dick.
unapologetic arsehole is the
He was.
character who you
And
like.
do you know what?
Fair
And
enough.
that's kind of like where the level was. I was like, every other character I found genuinely insufferable, and because he was just an unapologetic asshole, I was like, I respect that.
I find them to be teenagers, and as such, I
yes.
hate them.
Well, yeah, obviously.
But speaking of teenagers, obviously we should also mention a style of horror game that wouldn't affect these two, but has to go in as an honorable mention, which is more to do with and I've forgotten its name again, the one where you have 4 players who select teenagers and 1 player who selects a killer.
Dead by Daylight.
Dead by Daylight. That's human interaction creating the fear, and that's much more difficult to quantify as good or bad, if only because it entirely depends on the players.
Yeah.
You can have a great person playing the killer, but even that, it's very hard to make work.
Asymmetrical horror games I always look at and think are very difficult to get right.
They rely on a lot.
Yeah, you're relying on, I mean, we'll do a whole episode where we talk about kind of like balancing aspects of game design, but for the horror perspective of something like, Friday the 13th, where you're playing as Jason versus your camp counselors, or Dead by Daylight, where you're playing as myriad scary monsters against your kind of hapless group of teens. The asymmetricality of that is basically your killer is super powered and your teenagers are teenagers, and the horror then becomes but the horror has to be self-constructed and stuff. Again, a lot of that comes down to who you're playing with. An honorable mention from my perspective in terms of atmosphere would be Phasmophobia.
Fair. Soma potential.
Yeah, because both of those games create genuine. I mean, we played Phasmophobia together, and I have screamed.
You always scream.
But actually, full on visceral level scream, because that game builds up tension so well, and then it builds the tension, and then it just goes wham, jump scare.
Then everyone dies, but even
then you die.
Is entirely dependent on the people you play with, because you can have people who play that game who know everything, run through it, get everything, and they're done in 5 minutes, and that lessens a lot of it. Or people who are unsportsmanlike, who act like dicks. We've all played online game with people who
we have.
Just butt munch.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, we've now got, essentially, we're going to take the last few bits to have a look at games that aren't horror games, but have a little bit of scare in them. And I want to start with quite a weird one, which was Republic Commando, the Star Wars game.
I saw this on your list, and it took me a while to work out why this was on there.
It's a second section where you're on the abandoned ship, and there is a whole build-up to what's going on. And obviously, once you start shooting aliens, it all disappears because you're just shooting the crap out of things. But the silence, the darkness, for an Xbox game, it's done really well. Bad graphics mean you're limited in a lot of what you're able to do.
But I also think, actually, sometimes that you don't need good graphics to do good atmosphere. You need a decent understanding of level design.
No, you don't.
But like I said, it's that amalgam of all those things together.
But it's darkness obviously has quite an important effect. Also, it's often ruined when you hear the clones in that game talking to each other, because this is before they had, the clone voice action TV show. So it's actually just a bunch of people doing. Some of them try a New Zealand accent. A lot of them are just like, "Hello, I'm a clone."
Oh God!
How's it going, clone?
Oh no! I'm actually remembering this now, and I'm sitting there thinking, looking back, it was really cringe voice acting.
Yeah, it was. The only one
was like, oh.
Funnily enough, the guys who do the main clothes don't bother, and they do great. You've got Tamura
Morrison, who does 90%.
He does the main guy.
Yeah.
And then you have the guy who played Carthanassi in Knights of the Old Republic as one, which I was surprised to hear. But yeah, that's a game I think does it surprisingly well in one section, and does build it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think. Yeah, you go.
For me, my pick, And weirdly, it's a jump scare because there were several of them. But I think it very much plays into whether you are an arachnophobe or not. And it's Dragon Age 2. Because Dragon Age 2 had lots of dungeons that you went. So you spend most of your time in Kirkwall.
Yeah.
You venture out of Kirkwall and go into various things. And a lot of the caves you went into had giant spiders.
Sure.
Which are horrible, but you can deal with them. What I have umbrage with, and the game got me 4 times in a row, was walking into an area where it's filled with darkspawn. You kill the darkspawn, and then there are some spiders, and you kill the spiders, and then a giant spider drops, and then I think it was called a mother spider dropped from the ceiling, scared the absolute shit out of me.
I mean, Dragon Age.
I was on the verge of a meltdown. I was like, I have to pause the game, grab a wine.
Yeah, sure. It was the meltdown that made you pause the game and grab a wine.
Oh, it actually was. I was like, I'm not drinking today. Wham! Giant spider. Literally, and you don't even see it because of where the camera is based in Dragon Age 2, where it's kind of slightly, it's a third-person camera, but it's a bit further away than normal. And you just see this thing, it just go flomp on top of your character. And it was like, no, thank you.
I mean, we didn't go into on this episode. We will do in another episode the concept of body horror.
Yeah, because that's a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, but Dragon Age would be a great example of that with the brood mother and the
brood mothers and everything else.
Poem she does, on the first day they took the men, and you just kind of
it gets really weird and really creepy.
Yeah, and then you meet the dwarven lady, and she's just going, "It's fine. This was fine.
This is absolutely normal." And then you've also got the body horror in Dragon Age 2 at the end of it as well, with the whole weird amalgam that happens.
Yeah, and you've got to deal with angry Templar lady, and in Dragon Age 3, you've got to figure out what the fuck you're doing with your life.
I love Dragon Age Inquisition.
Dragon Age Inquisition is it spawned for another entry we may do, which is the concept of real-time mission settings.
Yeah, that was its biggest drawback.
I can complete this. It's going to take an hour.
Love the world, love the story, but those bits were, and we are going to do an episode on these because there are quite a few games that do that. It's not just mobile games that do this. There was a phase in console games in the mid-10s where real-time missions were a thing, and it was bloody infuriating.
I would also mention, for not just the body horror, but the environmental horror, is Mass Effect 3. When you go to the Asari empty planet with the screaming.
Oh,
great sequence, does it very well. No music, just screeching.
The Batman Arkham games as well as an honorable mention for good tension.
Scarecrow, sections. Yeah.
His sections in Arkham Asylum, and then some of the Joker bits and the music and the sound design in Arkham Knight as well.
Yeah, Arkham City has less horror in Arkham City. Arkham City doesn't worry about it too much. It's much more punching.
It felt like a bit of a breath of fresh air because you had horror in Asylum, and then a bit of a leveling out of no horror or very minimal horror in Asylum in a City, and then Asylum was just all Scarecrow all the time.
Yeah,
voiced by the phenomenal John Noble.
Yeah, although there is an argument about how they do the validity of some of the climbing sequences for Scarecrow, which get a little weird at times.
They do get
some of them get a bit punchy, the
last one was the weirdest and was the most action heavy.
Sure, although the one where they have Joker shoot you as they swap the beginning round and they say and it feels real until it says use the middle stick. That's great.
Oh, that was really clever. I love that. Because you do sit, and as a player, you're sitting again, oh, fucking middle stick. Oh, okay, we're in a nightmare.
Great, right.
But we all looked. The wheels were turning there. I was like, what? But then Arkham Asylum had a brilliant jump scare in the form of Killer Croc. When the first time you go into the sewers and you look through that thing and you're like, oh, there's some sewers, and then wham, Killer Croc, and you're like, Jesus wept.
But I would take that and challenge you with Arkham Knight Man-Bat.
I will change that because Man-Bat scared me, but not as much as the Joker peering over and going.
Either one of them jumping over and scaring the shit out of you.
And it only happens once. Each of them only happens once per playthrough.
But you
spend the rest of the game going, is he going to jump out? Am I going to get jumped? Am I going to get every time you're climbing up? You're like, for God's sake, don't jump out.
Yeah, and at that point you've built up a kind of thing of going, I'm a bit of a badass. Yeah, I
Yeah.
beat up 50 guys, didn't get
Yeah.
hit. It's cool and Jesus.
It's just like, but the best bit that the Joker one is the Joker one happens after you've dealt with Man-Bat.
Yeah, and
So you're
it's
like,
just
I've dealt with Man-Bat, I don't have to deal with any more jump scares, and then you just get him jumping out, and Mark Hamill is just, well, yeah, let's be serious now. Mark Hamill is the Joker. Let's be honest now.
yeah, no, Mark Hamill was, as Kevin Conroy was Batman.
Was
and it will
Batman,
be
may he
tragic
rest
that
in
he's gone,
peace.
but we will see him one last time
In Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which how much that explains why he's back in his Arkham Knight form, we don't know.
No idea.
Because
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, my
I'm
money is
excited
they're
for it.
clones, frankly.
Yeah, they're Brainiac. My assumption is they're Brainiac clones.
Yeah.
Because we know that Brainiac is the main antagonist. I'm looking forward to it though, because Rocksteady haven't dropped a game since Arkham Knight.
I've already said that I think Rocksteady need to make a Flash game with the same mechanics
Oh,
because
it'd be brilliant. That free flow combat would be so. We were talking about this actually the other
Yeah.
week when we were
free
planning
flow
when we were
running
talking. Yeah.
just be great. And you wouldn't have
It'd
to
be
deal
really good.
with the Batmobile, which is bullshit.
Yeah. I enjoyed driving around the city. I hated the fact that it became a mandatory game mechanic.
I will definitely make us do an episode on both mandatory certain mechanics like that, which are forced sections, essentially. They can work, they can't work. But I also want to do one on collectibles.
Ooh.
Because Riddler trophies. Yeah.
No, because Assassin's Creed's fucking feathers.
Yeah, all of them. Because some games do great collectibles where it's not necessary, others fuck you over.
Yeah. We're looking at you, Arkham and Assassin's Creed.
Looking at you. I wanted to punch the Riddler and you wouldn't let me until I got 600 of the little
Exactly.
fuckers.
Exactly. That's just
just wrong. I don't have time.
So wrong.
But
I did, and it wasn't worth it. Well, it was actually. It was.
It was great to punch
you
him.
Don't get to kick the crap out of him in Asylum. You don't get to kick the crap out of him properly in Arkham City. And they were like, do you know what? We've teased you for 2 games. You've collected about 400 of these trophies at this point. If you collect another 400, you can actually punch the crap out of him properly. With Catwoman.
And then Catwoman turns up and does her Catwoman thing, which is...
I liked Catwoman in that game.
I found Catwoman in that game suffered from how many splits can I do?
Yeah, she did very much suffer from...
And also
appropriate animation syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, why, for instance, when she was left in the thing, did she decide she had to lie on her side, licking herself?
Oh no, you know full well that she was just casually sitting there, and the second she heard that door open, she was like, "Take the sexy pose and wind up, Batman."
Is that a batarang in your pocket, or are you just pleased to
see me?
Because I have a wedgie in this outfit, and I smell. Because
I vacuum myself into this.
I am
bats
stuck. Do you have butter or talcum powder?
Both.
Either or.
Both bats. You've got to have both at this point.
I mean, they've done it on a roof in the comics, and you've got to wonder, the people below, do they hear the thumping or the squeaking first?
I would imagine the squeaking. The squeaking. It's got to be the lever on lever squeaking.
Yeah, but even in the comic, they're doing it, and it's sort of, oh, look at how perfectly this is going.
It's like, oh, it's so romantic. It's like, is it though, really? Because there's going to be a lot of chafing going on there.
But also, the reality is going to be, you'd be hearing, no, hold on, you need to pull it. No, not that way. My arm's stuck. Fuck, my arm's stuck. Oh, my shoulder.
Oh, no. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, you put my back out.
It's in the zipper.
Oh, no. I'm going to have to lie down for 20 minutes. It's fine. It's over with. It's over with. Go away. Go away. I'll put my back out. That's what you'd end up with in reality.
Well, about why? Wait, so they're over your trousers, the underwear? This is confusing.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's
a good place to call it.
Yeah, why not? Talking about Batman's sexual escapades on a roof. You know what you're in for.
What a way to end the first episode. This is it. This is what you're going to deal with now when you tune in for the next episode, which will be dropping at some point in the future.
Yes, we're going to get this one edited up and put out, and then we're going to kind of work to a pseudo timeline. Robot Republic is working on their YouTube timeline at the moment, just figuring out the best way to do new things. It's looking like it's going to be week on, week off would be the main gauge.
Yeah.
So it'd be every 2 weeks.
Watch this space.
Ideally, we're looking to do this both as a YouTube video and as a podcast in 2 different formats. It'll be the same thing, just without.
You can listen to us on the go. How great is that? You can watch our pretty faces, and then you can listen to us on the go.
Hear our dulcet tones. Or you could just put YouTube on in your car. But if you crash, don't sue us.
No. Because you can use YouTube Music to listen to us, because I'm sure I'll work out a way of making it appear on YouTube Music as well.
I don't know what that is.
It's the thing. It's an app that I have on my phone.
I don't trust things. They terrify me.
Love
Well, I
it.
don't go to the changing room in a gym.
Who does?
Well, that and I don't go to the gym.
Well, I was going to say, what's a gym? He's the
It's
guy
a
that lives at the
guy.
end of my street.
Untrustworthy fucker.
He is.
Anyway,
Good
thank you for
Christmas
joining
lighter.
us.
Yes.
Twitter will, I assume we're going to put what the next topic on Twitter will be. We may also start introducing.
We might start doing some polls here on the YouTube channel. There is, you may have noticed there was a poll up relatively recently to determine what I'm currently playing on stream, which is Sekiro. I say that we're recording this before the first stream of the year for me, so it might not be Sekiro, but it looks like it's going to be Sekiro.
I mean, it doesn't have spiders in it.
It does not have spiders in it, which for a FromSoft
It
game,
does have
I will take as a win.
Does have a blacksmith who becomes a giant flame and a giant monkey that loses its head.
I know that it's got the giant ape, the whatever it is, the giant ape that you cut the head off of, and then a giant millipede grows out of its skull to.
Yeah, then you fight two of them
puppeteer it.
because his girlfriend turns up. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's his girlfriend or the millipede's girlfriend. It's somebody's girlfriend.
Someone's girlfriend. I'm going to enjoy playing it if that's what I'm playing. If not, I'm playing Sonic Frontiers. So either way, win-win.
I mean, one's a kink, the other's actually probably also a king.
Yeah, I would say probably both of them are. Which says a lot about our fans, not me.
Sure.
Shut up.
Nobody plays Sonic who doesn't have an ulterior motive.
Lies and slander. Lies and slander. And
I've
on that
never
note,
slandered in my life.
And on that note, thank you so much for watching our inaugural version of the Game Design Vivisection.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. I've been Josh with Riku.
Hello.
And we'll see you next time.
And please do remember to like, subscribe, and what were your thoughts on what we discussed? Did you agree, disagree? Let us know in the comments below.
Do you have any points you want to make on different games?
Exactly. Did we miss anything out? But thank you for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Peace.